Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. It's Wednesday? Yeah, it's Wednesday. Midweek hump. And we all love a midweek hump. You're looking absolutely amazing, I must add, as we get on with this video. And look, some of you have reached out and said, look, sometimes, Harsh, you will just say how amazing I'm looking, and I look around me and I see myself sitting on the shitter, and I just think, he's wrong. He's wrong. But look, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and not all beautiful things have to be, I don't know, diamonds. You know, it's a bit bizarre, isn't it? Because now I'm thinking, could someone sitting on the shitter look amazing? Don't know. You have to let me know what you think to that. Anyway, I digress. Let's get into the meat and potatoes, as this video is going to upset some people. And so is likely video 2, as we have to talk about some things. But if we don't talk about them, we don't acknowledge them. And this article that we're going to speak about, the Cellebrite article, look, we have to be right, we have to be proper. But it does raise some questions. And I cancelled yesterday's live purely because of this article, and I want to have a discussion live with you guys once everyone's kind of looked at it and the dust has settled on it, and see what you think. So let's talk about this article. This is the article, and for those of you who haven't seen it, you may have seen it already. It is this one here, which says, Bryan Kohberger prepared for quadruple Idaho murders. Expert was set to testify he didn't just Google these cases. Now it says, before the DNA, before the arrest, before his name was ever made public, Bryan Kohberger was already preparing to kill. Two digital forensic experts tell Andrea Cavalier that they discovered by digging through his phone. So this is going to speak about phone information. And what I do find interesting at the moment is we do still have Cy Ray, who has vanished off the face of the planet. Lana had said that he was being quiet because ultimately he's still under gag. I don't know the truth in that, whether he can't talk, whether there is something in the background still happening. We'll see. We'll see what happens, because this is very interesting. This is very interesting. Let's click off that. Some of it I don't agree with. Some of this I don't agree, and I feel they're reaching, they're kind of stepping beyond their expertise, if you will. But some of it is pretty damning. At 2:54 a.m. on November 13, 2022, Bryan Kohberger's phone went dark. The battery hadn't died, and it wasn't randomly powered off. It was silenced with precision. Wi-Fi and cellular data were disabled, no location tracking on, and no background activity. A deliberate blackout during the exact window prosecutors say 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered at their off-campus home. 2 hours later, 4:48 a.m., the phone turned back on. It would be months before investigators fully understood what that gap in activity meant. But to forensic digital experts tasked by prosecutors with retracing Kohberger's steps for evidence to be used against him in his trial, the silence spoke volumes. What we learn is he prepared. Heather Bandhart, Senior Director of Forensics Research at Cellebrite, told The Independent. Now, don't get me wrong, what we have to kind of say here is Cellebrite aren't the be-all and end-all. They're not the best, the absolute best in their field, and it would be interesting to hear from potentially the likes of Axiom, perhaps, and see what they have to say. But this is Cellebrite, and in order to conclude that Cellebrite are lying, we are kind of pushing the envelope somewhat. We can say that DNA on a knife sheath there could be issues with DNA. We can question where the pictures are for the knife sheath, and could the knife sheath have been planted even, because you're at a very small local level, and that's not out of the realms of possibility. But when you start having to say, well, they're lying, and they're lying, and that's lying, that's lying, that's lying, and the net goes wider and wider and wider, you then have to consider, hold on a second, have we gone into the realms of, why would this guy be so important, or whatever is going on here be so important that so many agencies. So many things have to be kind of bent. And at the end of the day, Bryan Kohberger currently has pled guilty to the crime and he hasn't appealed as yet. But it doesn't fully, and I will say it doesn't fully mean that everything in this is accurate, and there is still one glaringly obvious question here that we will talk on towards the end of the video. But let's just dig into this, because also this will explain some of the things that Steve Gonsalves had potentially said, and maybe an element of that he should have an apology if this is accurate, especially if he's been told this, because that would have explained why he said what he did. So it says, but to digital forensic experts, right, silence speaks volumes, right? What we learned is he prepared. Now, again, I believe this is kind of stretching. You don't know that he prepared, but Barnhart and her colleague, Jared Barnhart, head of CX strategy and advocacy at Cellebrite, also a digital forensics expert on the case, was slated to testify at Kohberger's trial before he unexpectedly accepted a plea deal, admitting to the November 2022 quadruple murders and receiving life without parole in July. Kohberger was sentenced to life in prison for the murders of Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogans, Anna Knodel, and Ethan Chapin, who were found stabbed to death on November 13, 2022 in the small town of Moscow, Idaho. It says, digital silence, a red flag. Now, as more details began to trickle out through previously sealed police reports, the court documents, the team is revealing to the Independent what they learned about the killer through his digital footprint. The Cellebrite team had uncovered files scrubbed from devices, which is, we've heard there was things that were wiped. Searches routed through VPNs. Now, the searches through VPNs, I don't feel that is indicative of someone who was planning on murdering. I have to use VPNs frequently in order to get certain information. And if Bryan Kohberger is looking for specific documents, there could be reasons why he would be forced to use a VPN if he wants to access them. There are certain jurisdictional issues, which means that if you're in a certain area and you're looking for documentation or information around certain things, especially cases and killers and crimes, it could be that there is a restriction that means you cannot, outside of that area, request for something that's inside it. So a VPN being used is not indicative of anything nefarious. It is something that we see quite openly used. And deep downloads about serial killers, which backs up what I just said. All of which, they say, painted a chilling picture of obsession and planning. Now, I disagree with this bit. I completely disagree with this bit for the aforementioned reasons, but let's carry on. While DNA from the knife sheath ultimately tied Kohberger to the crime scene, it was the voids in his otherwise trackable life that revealed how the killings were premeditated, the experts say. Forensics analysis revealed that Kohberger's phone had only 4 periods of total inactivity dating back to June 2022. One of those silent moments occurred on the night of the murders. He didn't just lose signal or run out of battery, Jared explained. This was an actual button press, power off on purpose, and then a power back 2 hours later. And in the middle of that, 4 people were killed. So look, we have, and I have to kind of concede that is his phone off, was his phone on? Even the recent interview with Bill Thompson, he wouldn't definitively state the phone was switched off, but then Cellebrite here say, look, the phone was physically switched off. They've got proof that they can say that phone was switched off. Now, I had said this a long time ago. I believe it was in another case. It may have even been the Kylie Rodney case, where someone was talking about it. They said, yes, we can tell the difference between a soft close, where the battery just dies down because of a battery issue, and a hard close, which would be when the phone is physically turned off. And the lack of clarity in that in the Idaho 4 case, for me, was problematic. But with this, if this is accurate, again, and I can't agree with everything they're saying. You understand that? I don't agree with everything that when they should just stay in their fucking lane. But to turn around and say, look, the phone was physically turned off and it was physically turned back on, that to me is problematic, because you're in a situation now where you've got someone who all of these circumstantial elements do exist, and then in the middle of it all, you've got him physically turn his phone off. Now, again, I've always believed the Idaho 4 to have been a multiple perpetrator crime. I absolutely do. And Bryan Kohberger, look, we'll talk about this live, but this is saying that he switched his phone off. He physically switched his phone off. And for me, that is problematic. But again, I do have to wonder, why the fuck would you take your phone in the first place? But could it have been if Bryan Kohberger was a driver, for argument's sake? What if Bryan Kohberger was the driver and he's just got his phone on him, and then people in the car or someone in the car turns around and says, or his phone bleeps and they say, you need to turn your fucking phone off. Turn your phone off. It's too late. He's out of the house. But he then turns his phone off and puts his phone away, and then later on turns his phone back on. Would somebody who was planning the entire crime themselves as a sole killer, with the knowledge that Bryan Kohberger has, would he have brought his phone along with him? And why would you bring your phone along with you if you physically know that you're going to have to shut that phone off? Because you're admitting that you have knowledge that the phone is basically a tracking beacon. So I don't understand why they've taken it. And that, again, is problematic unless he took it by accident and there was somebody else in the car perhaps and they alerted him to the fact that he had his phone on him. But we'll carry on because I'm just spitballing. So it says, Kohberger was no stranger to killings, in theory. As a criminology PhD student at Washington State University, Kohberger had long been immersed in the study of crime, but according to the digital forensics team, his interest crossed a line from academic to obsessive. He didn't just Google these cases, Heather said. He downloaded full PDFs of case files, not once, but repeatedly. He was downloading detailed reports on serial killers, including Danny Rolling, who also murdered college students using a similar knife. Again, this potentially could be problematic, but because of his field of study, it could be nothing. Did you know, interesting fact, the Scream franchise was actually loosely based on Danny Rolling. This wasn't actually casual browsing, this was meticulous research. But did his field of studies allow meticulous research to be normality in his life? Potentially. To determine exactly, even Bill Thompson had turned around and said, let's not forget that, the lead prosecutor would speak specifically on his searching of this, of serial killers, and seemingly suggest that what he'd seen was not indicative of anything out of the ordinary based on his field of studies. So this is now Cellebrite stepping out of their lane and basically contradicting what the lead prosecutor is saying. And again, I then find that problematic because this then just becomes a hit piece. It's not any longer about just giving you the facts. This is about opinion, but it does say in theory. To determine exactly what happened during that 2-hour window on the night of the murders, the Cellebrite team recreated the digital environment and studied call logs. Turning off your phone isn't enough, Heather said. You have to disable Wi-Fi, disable cellular, then power down, and that's what he did. So this is a full stage phone blackout. And if this is honest, and this is accurate, and this is what he did, then he is involved in this crime. That is as simple as that. There is no reason whatsoever that somebody would do this, and you couldn't turn around and say somebody did this, and coincidentally some people died in that period of time that this was done. The issue is can these guys be trusted enough? And again, when you start saying, well, they're lying and they're lying and they're lying, they're also lying, that's lying, you then have to look, is the issue, is the crime big enough with enough heads involved that multiple agencies upon multiple things would be involved in actively lying? Or could they have just turned around and said, we didn't know anything? Would you have to go this far in depth? They discovered that in the days right before and right after the murders, Kohberger disabled Wi-Fi access to his devices and routed his traffic through NordVPN, a tool designed to anonymize online activity. Again, I don't find that this is indicative of anything criminal, but look, while the act is not criminal, it is abnormal, Jared noted. He was diligent in prep and cleanup, and he made our job really hard, Jared said. This is someone who tried really hard not to be detected. No, it's not. This isn't. And again, I argue with this because ultimately, this was an area that he was familiar with. This was an area that he didn't need fucking phone sat nav to go, and he was turning his phone off on certain occasions. So he could have left his phone at home. The simple act of leaving the house with your phone left at home would have eradicated all of this shit. So he didn't make it hard. He made it fucking easy because he took his phone out that would eventually lead to this, if this is accurate. So again, this is about someone who is clearly being tried. They're trying to pass him off as like he was some sort of genius then, but ultimately he was a fucking moron. He was an absolute fucking moron. If he's the person involved, he's a moron, an absolute fucking moron. But Kohberger failed to do a full cleanup of his phone. Details of what the team found, including scrubbed file, like he could have used a burner. He literally could have bought a pay-as-you-talk phone, not his actual main phone, and just did that. Now, we have got indicators in the documentation that there were multiple phones. So perhaps some of this was done on a different phone, but they're just not stipulating that. I don't know, but in the PCA, that would suggest that the phone in question is his main phone because they give you a partial of the number. Details of what the team found, including scrubbing files, private browsing, VPN activity, and obsessive downloads about other serial killers, were found hidden deep in his phone. Not in a visible gallery or standard folder, but in buried file directories that required forensic tools to uncover. He had also downloaded reports on the Idaho murders and extensive searches of his victims. Again, I don't find that problematic because this would have been in the aftermath of the crime. It's close to him. And look, I'm on the other side of the fucking pond and I'd done exactly the same thing. The team pointed out that despite law enforcement's hard work, there was a period of time from the time of the crime happened until identify and arrest, the phone seizure, and then the phone extraction to some of the best information was most likely wiped. But with time and attention, we were able to paint a picture of what he did on this night, Jared added. Even though some of the best stuff wasn't there, he certainly didn't cover all of his tracks. Kohberger's digital footprint also include a passive log of Wi-Fi networks his phone sought out. On the night of the murders, before his phone was turned off, the phone was searching for Wi-Fi signal, and he wasn't at home, Jared said. And while motive and any connection between Kohberger and the victims remains completely unknown, to the frustration of the victims' families, there is some digital evidence that showed Kohberger may have encountered at least one of the victims previously at their workplace. Madison Mogan and Xana Knodel worked at local restaurant The Mad Greek as servers before Kohberger murdered them. After the killings, a fellow employee said they remembered Kohberger visiting it twice and eating vegan pizza. Now, what I will say is there is an issue with this statement here. There is conflicting information. Some people say that he never went there, including the Mad Greek themselves saying that he didn't go there. But then we have someone there who's saying that he remembers Bryan Kohberger being there. So one Wi-Fi log caught Heather's attention when she was searching his digital footprint, the network name for the Mad Greek. Though nothing concrete tied him to the location at the time of the murders, the Wi-Fi log suggested he had been there before, possibly more than once. There it was, Heather confirmed. His device had passively logged that network. No smoking gun. Unlike the DNA on the knife she found at the scene, the digital evidence didn't deliver one big aha moment, the team said. Instead, it emerged slowly through fractured call logs, gaps in data, and strange behavioral shifts. There wasn't a single smoking gun, Jared said, but we found that the digital evidence told the story of preparation. DNA can tell you who did it, he added, but the digital evidence shows us intent, and that's what we were going to testify to. Again, I feel that they could have potentially been made to be looking a little bit going outside of their remit, but Heather emphasised that proving intent required building a baseline of normal digital behaviour and then watching how it drastically changed leading up to the crime. If you can prove normal behaviour and then go, whoa, this is completely abnormal, and that moment aligns with the crime, well, that's not an accident. And that's what the period of silence showed. His relationship with mother. While much of Kohberger's activity pointed to calculation, isolation, one relationship remained steady, his connection to his parents. Starting at 6:13 a.m. the morning after murders, he's calling and texting his mum and dad non-stop, Heather said. It was incessant, but it was also one of the only things he did that matched his normal behaviour. Even in the weeks leading up to the killers, Kohberger's digital communication showed a few signs of friends or peer connections. Jared recalled seeing only one other contact, a classmate, briefly engaged in a group chat. All other correspondence was to Kohberger, called mother, father, and sister. The moment we started to look at the messaging, it made me think of Bates Motel, Jared said, referencing the horror movie Psycho. I mean, it was like Mother and the label Mother. The constant contact with his mum, it was wild. On December 29th, a day before his arrest, Kohberger began calling and texting his parents obsessively, just as he had on the morning of the murders. If his mum didn't answer, he'd call his dad, they said. That same day, Kohberger searched times like paranoid, psychopath, and wiretapping. It was obviously weighing on him, Heather noted. The contact with his mother continued after his arrest with inmates at Ada County Jail, reporting that while he was locked up, waiting to hear his fate, he spent hours on the phone with his mother. Described by other prisoners as a fucking weirdo, inmates said he would wash his hands dozens of times each day and would spend 45 minutes to an hour in the shower. Court documents stated Kohberger's mother and sister were present during sentencing. At one point during the victim impact statements, his mother broke down in tears. The only time Kohberger spoke at the hearing was to respectfully decline the opportunity to address the court or reveal why he committed the gruesome murders. We didn't find the why, but we found the how. Despite their exhaustive efforts, the forensic team never found a true why. We didn't find the why, Heather admitted. We wanted to for the families, and that was frustrating, but we found the how. And the how, they say, suggests it was spontaneous. This wasn't someone who just snapped, Heather added. This was someone who planned. He didn't accidentally stumble into the house and commit this heinous crime. It was intentional. But again, this does, however, completely contradict, again, what Bill Thompson said, in that their complete lack of information led him to believe that this could have likely been a random house that Bryan Kohberger just decided to pick literally right before the crime. So when you've now got Cellebrite for the second time in this article contradicting what the lead prosecutor is saying, this then becomes further problematic, and I don't know whether I can fully get on board with what they're saying. Again, let me know what you guys think. The red flag in all this, and the red flag that can't be ignored, is the fact that Bryan Kohberger, they're saying that Bryan Kohberger not only turned his phone off, but he went through the specific method of switching the phone and shutting it down to cause a blackout on it. If that's real, if that's right, if that's true, if that's honest, then I'm telling you Bryan Kohberger was involved in this crime. Was he the sole killer? I don't think so. I've never felt that this was a single perpetrated crime. I also feel the person who did this crime had killed before. But it's the authenticity of some of the statements in the article that we just looked at. And when they completely contradict what the lead prosecutor is saying, as aforementioned, this becomes problematic. But let me know what you think, and we'll get together Thursday and have a chat about it. Love you all. Enjoy your midweek hump. Mwah.